everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for our webinar. Before we dive in, I just wanted to let you know that you are all on mute by default. So if you have any questions, you can drop those in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, which we'll be monitoring throughout the session. And then we'll have some dedicated time at the end of the webinar as well. And then you will also receive a recording of today's webinar. So if you missed something and you need to go back, we will send that via email after the webinar. That's all for me, so I will hand it over to John, and you are all set and enjoy the webinar. Thanks.
Thank you everyone for attending. Today we're going to be talking about new features and the new look of version 8.6.4. I'm sharing my screen and I'm on the landing page for Counterpoint 8.6.4, and obviously you will all notice, if you have not already noticed, the new menuing system. So Counterpoint has replaced its old pastel colors with a new updated user interface. There's more to the user interface than just the color scheme changes, but just to point them out, the screen itself does not behave that much differently than it did previously. Obviously, primary menu functions are on the left-hand side for the modules. As you hover over them, they will backlight in purple. Similar to previous versions, recently used items are displayed across the top of our homepage, and these operate as before. The last two releases, recently used and favorites, had disappeared for a little while because some issues in their new menuing system. But we have recently used items and favorite items back as they were in 8.5.7. We're still able to do searches, looking for items within our menu, and we can still declare items as favorites or rearrange our favorites. And to rearrange items from our favorites, just as it was before, clicking on the star allows us to rearrange and put them in a different order. As we drill into submenus, the submenus are as before. The only big difference you'll notice on the menuing system is they've removed a slide bar. And so you'll notice on my primary menu, I'm able to view point of sale down through data interchange. I have other menu functions beneath that on that menu. There's system, there's setup, and I have a custom folder as well. So once you get into 8.6.4, you're probably going to have to drag your window size a little bit taller to fit them all. In previous versions, there was a slide bar that would slide you up and down through that menu tree if it didn't all fit on your monitor. And that's really the only thing that I think is missing from the new menuing system. We'll talk more about the look and feel of it as well. But you may want to, if you have a much taller menu with lots of custom folders, rearrange that, prioritize it, and kind of relayer it so it fits all without having to slide up and down. One of the things that you will notice with the menu, obviously, is the pastel colors have gone away. The buttons are white, and many of you have white images. So right now you're seeing images on my buttons in addition to the text. Some of you may have only seen text on your buttons. There are new images. We'll talk more about how to deploy those, to add images to your buttons. The other thing we can do with the system is we can change the size of the buttons. And so you'll notice things like my touchscreen codes and my transfer in entry, the image and the text are kind of colliding. And you know that existed before as well. But if we change the size of the buttons, we can kind of alter that and make the buttons a little bit more readable. Things like data interchange import, where I've got 3 lines of text. That is always going to be a little bit more difficult, but the interchange import is probably the key to reading that button. So we'll talk a little bit about changing your button sizes. Let's jump into that now. There is a utility that's included with the Counterpoint installation, and you'll find this in your bin folder. And this is the user interface upgrade proj.exe. So this UI upgrade proj.exe opens up a utility that allows us to control our button sizes. And so within this function, we're able to select a database. So I'm going to select my Red Sox database, which is actually Demo Golf. And from within this, I can change some accent colors, I can change button sizes, I can change font sizes of the text on the buttons. So you can manipulate a lot of this. I would recommend before doing anything here, making a backup of your database and potentially even backups of your menus and of your touchscreen configurations. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But the first thing I'm going to do here as an example is I'm just going to change the menu button size. I've got that fairly large right now at 140. Actually, I think it's technically 100, but we'll play with that a little bit. And because I haven't tested every single action in here, I'm going to disable most of these things. So I'm not going to do anything with my touchscreen buttons. I'm not going to do anything with my payment entries. So I'm going to disable a lot of these functions just so they don't apply to something that I don't care about. And so the menu button size, I'm going to increase that to, oh, let's go super large and let's go to 200. And so I've altered it, the element, I've disabled some other elements, and then I can apply that to my selected company. So if I have multiple databases, as I do, I can apply that to a single database as applying it to all of my databases. And this will take a second or two, and it's successfully upgraded. And so I'll just minimize that. And so for that to apply, I'm going to relaunch Counterpoint. Another thing you may have noticed is the Counterpoint icon has changed to the purple circle with the dots, as opposed to that green. I don't even know how I would describe the old icon. I think this is a little easier to describe to somebody over the phone. And I'm just going to go ahead and log into Counterpoint on my other monitor here. And so now the buttons are much, much larger. I actually went from 100 to 200. And that makes that transfer in entry a lot easier to read. But obviously, the bigger the button size, the fewer the buttons I can fit on my screen. So if it's cutting off text, and the text is really what you're using to identify the buttons that you actually want to launch, larger buttons are going to make those a lot easier to see. Suggestion would be if you're really testing to see what fits and what reads well on a menu with lots of buttons, I would suggest looking at inventory reports. The inventory reports folder has more buttons than probably any other. And so there are scroll buttons here to scroll through all of those buttons. And obviously I've got lots of pages of buttons with so many inventory reports. But that's a good way to test and see if you like the look and feel of the new button size. I had mentioned we can play around with the actual pictures on the buttons as well. Counterpoint previously with the pastel or colored buttons used white images. So many of you who have installed 8.6.4 may have found the images disappeared. And the reason for that, they really haven't disappeared. It's just a white picture on a white background. So it's kind of camouflaged. We can provide you with a copy of the images zip file, and this contains all of the same images, but as you can see from my pictures, those pictures are in grayscale rather than in white. And so those images would get unzipped. And if you're going to be doing this on your own, those go into your Counterpoint directory, which is on your server, into your program files x86, Radiant Systems, Counterpoint, and you may have CPSQL1, you may have OTools or OTGC.1 or whatever your garden or company name is, and then within that, inside your top level folder. And the way Counterpoint always plays with customized elements is the default elements are always going to be found in the system folder. So in system, I have images, and these are all the pictures for all of my menus and things. But if we're customizing things, we want to place those into our company folder. So my company is the Red Sox, and within the configuration, I have an images folder. And on a blank company, the image folder is empty, or on a new company, because nothing's been modified yet. But that's where you would unzip those images to. And then when you relaunch Counterpoint, it will apply the company-specific images rather than the default images, and you will go from white pictures on a white background that you can't see to grayscale images on a white background that you can. If you want to replace the images that they provide with your own, you're more than welcome to do that. In terms of backing things up before you make any of these changes, like button style or images or things like that, obviously backing up the database is a good place to start. But there's a couple things that I might back up independently. So when I'm playing with menu codes, I might back up that menu code independently. And rather than restoring the entire database, I can restore the actual menu codes. And menu codes are not an easy table to export through data interchange and just import back in. So to save those as backups, if I select my menu code and if I go into the menu editor, there's a way of saving the entire menu structure with all of the parameters and things of that nature. So if I click on the options function, I can save the menu to disk, and it saves my menus, my menu configuration as an XML file. So I might call that MGR menu and save that as an XML. And then if I ever have to restore that menu, I can go back to options and I can load the menu from the disk and find that manager menu XML file to kind of overwrite my previous instance. So if I really mess up the menus, I can bring them back that way. Another thing you may have noticed with 8.6.4 is font colors change in touchscreen. So if I jump into my touchscreen configuration, and if I look at my touchscreen config, it comes up over here. What Counterpoint does when it upgrades to 8.6.4 is it changes the default font from black to white, which causes some problems. And the best thing to do, and what I mean by that, is it changes these fonts here to white. And if your touchscreen, looks like this, that's not a big problem. Colors with a white font, it looks okay. But if you have white images or really, really faint light yellow, buttons, the white font doesn't read very well. So if it changed the default font from black to white, any button that's configured with a default font will go from black to white. If it has a specific font, like this one here, where it's named as Lotto 8 white, will stay as is. So it really only impacts any button that uses the default font. And so before upgrading it to 8.6.4, my recommendation is, just like I did with the menu codes, I would recommend saving copies of your touchscreen configuration. You can go back and fix the buttons independently, but if you've got 50 pages of buttons, that can take some time to do. So it's quicker to, before upgrading, save a copy. So within each touchscreen configuration that you're using, on the Layout tab, if you click on Save, we can save a copy of the touchscreen configuration, again, as an XML file, and it saves all the colors, pictures, fonts, everything that was associated with that touchscreen config before the upgrade, and then we can restore it using the load function. So this is a great way to back up your touchscreen configuration. I always recommend doing this if you're going to manipulate a lot of buttons and make a lot of changes to the config. It's nice to have a backup to play as a safety net if you ever need to restore it. Next thing I want to talk about, and we can actually do it right from this screen here, is you'll notice the toolbar functions have gone to a black background. Some people like it, some people don't. You don't have to keep it that way. And so we can provide a registry file. Let me grab that here. There's a registry file we can provide you with. And so this CP toolbar reg file can actually replace this black background with the images that were there before. And so to apply that, if you're going to be doing this on your own, if I go into regedit and import that registry file, I can get rid of that black background and put it back to what it was previously, basically. So if I go into my registry editor and click on my HKey local machine, I can go to I'm going to import a new D word. Actually, can I just do it from here? Yeah, I could actually easier. Go File, Import, and then I can browse to that CP Toolbar registry file. And that's been added to the system. And so if I close out of Counterpoint and launch that back, my toolbar should have updated. It'll be more colorful with a white background. And there are my toolbar images, white or grayscale background, a little different than they were before. Another big thing that 864 did is they're beginning to introduce some new features. And one of them is a new accounting interface, which we're really not opening up to the public quite yet, but it's going to be an interface to QuickBooks Online. It's in kind of its early stages. And when you install Counterpoint 864, it actually disables your existing accounting interface, which I don't think I would describe as a feature, but it's quick and easy to bring that back. And so if I go into my top level folder, there are some control options. This is a new file. And so the control options.ini file kind of determines a little bit about the menu and a little bit about the accounting interface. And so the only entry I have in here is for my accounting interface. And so when you install 864, it's going to default it to disable your accounting interface. No means there is no accounting interface. And we're going to change that to the legacy. So L for legacy. And if I don't do that, you will notice in Counterpoint, if I go to Setup and System, my accounting interface menu button has disappeared. And that's because the accounting interface in the control options is set to no. So if I change that to L for legacy and save and exit out of that, next time I launch Counterpoint, I will have that back. Again, these are all things that you, if you're going to be doing the Counterpoint upgrade on your own, these are things that you want to be prepared for. And so now if I go into Setup and System, my accounting interface function is back. And it's not just the setup of the accounting interface. Obviously, we're also talking about voucher receivings and distribution to general ledger interface. So really the whole functionality of your accounting interface is controlled by that. The last thing I want to talk about is an actual feature that's in 864. And this relates to users. So if I go into my setup system users and I pull up my user ID, Counterpoint allows us to create a QR code for a user ID. And so Actually, you can do it from here first. Yeah, okay. So before we can assign QR codes to a customer, we have to enable QR codes. So I'm going to, in Quick Setup, you can do this in Quick Setup or in the company setup, but it's probably easier from Quick Setup to find it since it's right on the company tab. We're going to say that we're using QR codes, and we're going to use the QR for username and password. And so I'm going to hit OK. Okay. And so now if I go into users, I can view the QR code for this particular user. Notice that was grayed out before. And so what Counterpoint does is it actually creates a GUID, which is a big, long, unique identifier. And so this QR code does not represent the user ID and the password. It represents the GUID, or the generic unique identifier. And so we can generate new QR codes, and that picture will change if we want to. So we can, if somebody loses their generated QR code, we can generate them a new one. And that's going to obviously create a new GUID for the customer, for the user, and update the picture. And so I'm just going to use my snipping tool to kind of simulate this. Now I've got a picture of the QR code. And so I can use this QR code for logging into Counterpoint, logging into touchscreen, and they say it works for user ID, for overrides in point of sale for things like line voids or ticket voids or completed sale voids or price overrides and things like that. So you can use this rather than typing in your username and password for everything. So let's see how that works. So if I go to touchscreen, it brings up my user ID and password. I have them both on the screen at the same time? No. Okay, so scanning the QR code populated the user ID and password and proceeds to activate the drawer and load my touchscreen. So again, you can use that for login, for logging into touchscreen, and supposedly you can use that for things like overrides. And like I said, if somebody loses their card, I would regenerate them a new one and reprint it. So you can print this on anything that'll print, any laser printer or anything like that. So you can print your own QR codes for employees, for managers only. You can decide who you want to generate them for. You're printing this on a laser printer, so it's not really costing you any money to generate the card stock. If I scan that QR code into something like Notepad, you can see that it's an encrypted unique identifier. Nowhere in there can you decipher a user ID or password. So those are the topics I wanted to cover with things that are new within 8.6.4. Are there any questions from the audience? I think we already have something in the Q&A. Does RCS still offer its own QuickBooks and Counterpoint integration independent from NCRs within 8.6.4? Yeah. So if the question, and this is from Anonymous, so I'm not sure if you're talking about QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Legacy. So if you're talking about QuickBooks Legacy, we still have a custom import, IIF file import or tab delimited import for getting data from Counterpoint to QuickBooks Legacy. NCR still has the direct interface from Counterpoint to Legacy QuickBooks. If you're going to QuickBooks Online, RCS does have an external tool for an import tool. I just installed it last week at a customer site that does take use the export interface from Counterpoint, and the import tool basically allows you to link the import tool to your existing Counterpoint online application, and it allows you to point to the file you want to import and passes that up to QuickBooks Online and imports it. So yes, that is still available. Will this be a required update, or can it be skipped until the interface is further refined? I'm not sure if that you're saying the interface for QuickBooks is further refined, or the menuing system, or Counterpoint 8.6.4 is further refined. In terms of features and functions in 8.6.4 versus 8.5.7. I think it's a little lean on features. There's some things that are supposed to be coming out like in Q4, so like next month, with things like purchasing advice and some other new features that'll be patches for 8.6 that you would not have in 8.5 or 8.5.7. We have many customers that'll skip a version, or wait until it's further in play just before deciding to upgrade to it. RCS typically sits on versions for a month or two and installs them internally, and utilizes them to look for issues, and before we push them on our customer base, because we obviously don't want to be supporting things that are problematic. Whenever possible, we avoid that. So we're not insisting people to upgrade to 8.6.4. Let's put it that way. If people want to upgrade, in terms of PCI compliancy, you are supposed to be on the latest version of the software, but you do have some leeway on this for now. And certainly going into holiday season for a lot of our customers, this is not the time to be upgrading. January might be a better time frame for them, so that's perfectly within reason to wait that long. Yvette or Amanda, were there any other questions that I haven't seen?
I don't see any other questions, John. I guess we finished up a little bit earlier than anticipated, but that's okay. We can give everyone a half an hour of their time back. Um, so yeah, if there's no more questions, I guess we can wrap it up. So thank you all for joining us today. You will all receive a recording of today's webinar via email, so keep an eye out on your inbox. And if you do have any other questions about the new updates, then you can reach out to your account manager, and we'll be happy to help you.
I would also say, if you're planning on doing the upgrades on your own, reach out in advance. I had mentioned those two files, the registry file and the images zip file. Be helpful to have those on hand ahead of time, so you can install those.
All right, awesome. Thank you, John, and thanks everybody for attending. Have a nice day, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.